Yo, what's up, y'all? Happy Friday. It's finished on Fridays. I'm doing it at noon today because, yeah, I had kid logistics, and kid logistics take time. So, I hope y'all are good today. Today, we're talking about how almost doesn't count. I'm super excited to actually talk about this particular topic. We're just going to give people a couple of minutes to come in. And I think we're gonna have some vibes pop in here real quick. Just um there we go. All right. Okay, definitely not feeling that. Yeah, this is actually the old jam that I used to do. So we're gonna be talking about how almost doesn't count today. So welcome to Finish Strong Friday. Getting ready to pull up a couple things from LinkedIn, Facebook, just so we can talk about why this notion of almost doesn't count comes in. And so, if you're part of my newsletter, you actually already know what's up. I talked a little bit about this on my in my newsletter, and so I like to use Fridays as just really a way to expand on the topic of what we're talking about. And so this whole notion around how almost doesn't count is a big piece of that. Hold on. Ah, okay. It's crazy. Like I'm pulling up the other stuff, and so naturally it starts playing. So it's a slight moment of panic, if you will. So thank you for bearing with me in that. It's been a little crazy. All right, so here's the deal. When we start to look at what we're talking about as far as almost doesn't count, there's a little bit of a philosophy that I have around it. And what I'll be teaching specifically about in terms of this whole notion of almost doesn't count. Okay. Um, and so let's just kind of tell a little bit of a story. We're going to do some storytelling and then we're going to hop in. Just as always, these are an opportunity for you to get live actual coaching. So last week we had somebody hop in and do live coaching with me. I can always drop the link and you can say, hey, I actually want to do some live coaching, and I'm able to do it with you. So if you want to do that, let me know. I'll drop a link in the chat and I'll pull you up on stage, and then we can talk and you can experience live coaching live in living color, if you if you will. um so there's a couple things, and actually I'm just dropping this in here just so you guys can have it, and then we're gonna hop in. I'm gonna pull up my notes about what we're gonna talk about today, because it's gonna be good, I promise you. All right, so I'm gonna drop this into LinkedIn. So oddly I have to manually drop these into the other ones so that everybody can get it. So it's live coaching, so you can experience what it looks like live. All right. So what's this whole notion, right? Realistically, one of the biggest things that I see burnout come through, right? So, and the reason why I call this almost doesn't count is because I'm a 90s, I was an 80s baby. So I grew up in the 90s, and it always makes me think about the Brandy song, Almost Doesn't Count, right? And so when I think about this whole notion of really where I think burnout starts to seep in, a lot of times it's not actually coming from it's not always coming from a job you hate. I think a lot of times people think burnout can start to creep into place because you're doing a job that you don't actually like, that you don't enjoy. And one of the things that we have to remember or think about, and I think a lot of people just don't necessarily know or take note of, if you will, is that almost is sometimes just as bad as just straight out bad, right? So when we think about this, right, one of the pieces of the puzzle that we talk about is like this career trap, okay? And so if you had to think about like your day to day, your actual work, when you're going outside, like it's like, we'll just say it's an energy check, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how energized are you about your work right now? on a scale. No explanation needed. You can drop it in the chat if you want to. For those of y'all who are on LinkedIn, on Facebook, all the other places on YouTube, drop a one in the chat. Like drop a number 1 through 10. Right? How energized are you feeling about your work? You don't even have to explain. Don't be shy, you know. I promise you, because this is going to be the key, right? And if you don't want to put the number in, that's okay too. Because I know sometimes people don't want to put their number in because they're watching. I just not realize I still got vibes going. I love this song. So let me go ahead and pause that. So here's the thing, right? One of the things that fascinates me is when we think about high performance, when we think about our job and think about the things that we're doing, right? There's a surprising pattern that shows itself. This is the surprising pattern, is that most successful people aren't complaining about toxic bosses or meaningless work, right? Most successful people aren't complaining about toxic jobs or meaningless work, right? And what does that mean? They have you know, they have good jobs. They have respected roles. They have great teams. They have projects that matter. But here's the catch. They're still exhausted. The most successful people, right? They aren't complaining about this, right? The common phrase I hear is, I can't figure out why I'm so burned out. The work is good. I believe in what I'm building. I have a great team. I love it. Right? I know that the work I do is important, but I feel like I'm still kind of coming up short. I still feel empty. And the question is, why is that? Right? Why is this actually happening? Why is it that when you see people who are successful on paper, have all the things lined up, and then they're still experiencing a level of burnout? Okay. And so one of the pieces of the puzzle sorry. So one of the pieces of the puzzle really around this is, why do you feel tired? Even if on paper everything looks good, great job, great title, good team, good work, meaningful work, but you're still feeling this rub, this pull. This doesn't feel right. I feel empty. I'm still not energized. I still don't have energy. What's going on? So what I'm going to talk to you today really about, what I'm going to show you, is why the work that feels close but not quite right is actually draining you more than the work that you probably openly hate. And more importantly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a concrete framework to really help you identify and fix these energy levels. Okay, so that's what we're covering today. So in the next 30 minutes to 40 minutes, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the hidden energy vampire. We're going to talk about an alignment audit. How do you figure this out? We're also going to talk about strategic shifts that you may want to make. And then I'll give you just like a couple things you can do over the next 30 days to really help you hone in on this. Okay. So here's what I'll say. And I appreciate you guys for replying back with your numbers, right? On a scale of 5, on 1 to 10. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Yvette. I see those numbers. So here's how, this is what we're looking at. Okay. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot. It's just how I articulate my feelings. So if I get excited, I tend to move my hands more. So just bear with me. It's how I connect. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about, very first thing we're going to look at, is called the hidden energy vampire. Okay. This is the very first thing that we're going to talk about. Okay. Why is this important? Why is the energy vampire most important? There's a couple of things, right? So let me paint a picture. You're in a meeting. You're discussing a project that you care about. The direction is close to what you choose, but not quite, right? Team dynamics are mostly healthy, but there's one thing that grates on you. Something that's just not sitting well. The role uses your skills, but not your strongest ones. And this is what I call almost aligned work. And it's an energy vampire. And so a lot of times when I'm working with people, it's really cool. I'm actually building an app right now. I've been working on it the last 2 days that does an assessment. And the reason why is because sometimes it's not that the work isn't good. It's that the work is almost right? Like it's not utilizing your zone of genius. So there's a great book called, I think it's called The Big Leap. I'm almost 80% sure it's called The Big Leap. Um, yes, it's called The Big Leap, okay, by Gay Hendricks. And so one of the things that he talks about, right, is he calls these zones. And one of them's called like, I can't remember one of the zones, but you have all of them, but there's zone of incompetence, zone of competence, and zone of genius. Oftentimes, people are operating in their zone of either incompetence by design of their job sometimes, or their zone of competence, which means, and a lot of times, zone of competence pays the bills. That's the almost part, right? For a long time, I got paid very well just operating in my zone of competence. But when you start to, I see this a lot of times, but when you start to realize, like, hey, there's more to me, there's more I want to do, I have deeper levels of things that I can actually give, then there's a tipping point. And you really want to start to operate in your zone of genius. This is what levels people up. When you are willing to get out of your zone of competence and start operating in your zone of genius. Are you with me? And so in the chat, just be thinking about this. You can respond or not. The part of my work that feels almost right, but not quite is, and then fill in the blank. Don't overthink it. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Right? Because it's almost there, right? That's how you have to start to think about it. And so when you look at these responses, we have to know that there's a counterintuitive truth. So when our work is completely misaligned, our systems kick in, right? We job search, we speak up, we make changes. And so the misalignment is so obvious that action eventually does become inevitable in most cases, right? But almost aligned work tricks us into thinking the problem is us. We tell ourselves, I should be grateful. It's a great opportunity. Maybe I'm being too picky, right? If I just work harder, I can make this feel right. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Like, let me know. Can I get an amen in the corner somewhere? Right? Because typically when it's almost right, this is where we battle. Like if it's wrong, if it's just completely like, yo, I know this ain't it. You're going to be on LinkedIn, on Indeed, looking for the next thing. It's very clear. But when it's almost there, we can really start to feel like it's us. Right? And here's what happens. You're going to end up spending 40 plus hours a week being 85% of yourself, 75, 80% of yourself. And that missing 15 to 25% is what will create a constant low level friction into professional exhaustion. Are you with me? I hope so. Let me know in the chats if you're with me, right? Like, does this make sense? Am I making sense to you? Real quick, pause. Great question. Jessica said, does everyone have a zone of genius? Yes, everyone has a zone of genius. Let me see if I can kind of oh, sorry. And like actually I got them. So there's zone of incompetence, zone of competence, zone of excellence, and then zone of genius. I knew I was missing one. So let me explain to you the difference between each one of these, right? It's a great book. It's called The Big Leap. And I'm just going to share my screen because it just makes it easier. Give me a second. Let's share. Where am I? I'm gonna share a window because then it's easier. All right. So we're going to share this. This is an infographic from The Big Leap. It's from the actual book. Okay. So when you have your zone of genius, right? This is kind of your time and then your talent. What's the best use of your talent? What's the best use of your time? So when we start to get into zone of genius, and this is quadrant 2, and what you will find is most quadrants, whether you're looking at, if you think about the Eisenhower matrix, this upper right zone, this upper right quadrant is usually the highest that most people want to go after, right? So when you think about it, or you want to make time, even I have my own matrix, which I'll be sharing with you guys eventually. Shout out to my Power Hour clients. They actually will get the first look at that. Your zone of excellence, and so I said that wrong. Your zone of competence are things that you can actually do just as well. Like it's pretty good, right? Others can do things, they can do it just as well as you. Your zone of excellence are the things that you can do extremely well and can make a good living. This is where typically others want you to stay. You're really good at your job. The zone of genius. This is the set of activities you are uniquely suited to do, and they draw specifically upon your special gifts and your strengths. So the answer to your question is yes, everybody has a zone of genius. The question is actually the rub, if you will, to answer your question, Jessica. Yes, everybody does, but most people don't take time to figure it out, right? If you've went through, I did a leadership cohort, or if you do coaching with me, one of my favorite things to do is strength finders. If you don't know what your strengths are, it's going to be hard to start to understand where your zone of genius are. Most people don't stop to assess, right? Most people don't stop to actually assess where they are and what their strengths are and what they're uniquely created to do. They say, oh, I've got this job, I've got this thing, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm really good at this thing, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And we don't stop and pause, right? There's a lot of things, for me, I've been wildly successful because I can operate pretty heavily into my zone of competence and my zone of excellence. And my span of zone of excellence is fairly high because I think my zone of genius is I can actually learn things very, very, very quickly. And then I'm able to kind of learn things extremely quickly, especially like technology, new technologies, be able to really understand that and actually move it towards that. That's like part of my zone of genius, right? Part of my zone of genius, I've had a unique set of skills. Now I sound like Liam Neeson from Taken, but I have this unique set of skills that allows me to kind of think about it, right? The experiences I've had, the certain things that I've done, I have a very specific set of skill sets that I've acquired over time that allow me to mesh up, and it creates this unique experience for us, right? But everybody has a zone of genius, okay? But the question then becomes, how do we look at making sure that 15 to 25% is just missing all the time, right? And this is what messes people up. And it's just this low level of friction day in and day out. And then over time, this is where you start to see the burnout, okay? This is where you start to see the burnout, because it's not that you hate what you do. It's just not in full alignment. And then that little bit over time just starts to wear you down. So here's what's actually happening neurologically. Got it. That's a good Friday word. So when we're in complete misalignment, right? Our stress response is very clear, right? And it's actionable. Okay. But when we are in partial alignment, when we're almost there all the time, what we become is we're in this constant state of low level cognitive dissonance. Does that make sense? You'd be like, it's almost there. Right? Have you ever a great example of this? A great example of this is have you ever gotten a recipe from somebody? If you've ever gotten a recipe from somebody, and in that recipe, what ends up happening in that recipe is they give it to you and you be like, oh yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much. And then you go home and you do the recipe, but there might've been a step or a piece of a step that was missing. And it was like almost a recipe, but it didn't taste like what they made. That there's a level of cognitive dissonance. That's kind of how I think about it. And so part of this is what's happening is your brain is working overtime. It's trying to resolve the gap between this should feel right and this doesn't feel quite right. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat, drop some hearts. I see you guys on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other places. Let me know if that's making sense to you, right? So that's it. That's that cognitive dissonance. You're sitting in a gap between this should feel right, but it doesn't feel quite right. And there's mental energy that could be going somewhere else, with creativity, with problem solving, towards moving towards your peak, higher levels of performance, but you can't because you're sitting in this cognitive dissonance that is slowly chipping away. Can I get an amen somewhere? I know y'all are watching online because I see all the numbers over here, right? But y'all are quiet. I respect that. So this is what happens. So this is the hidden trap of the energy vampire. This is why it almost doesn't count. You've got to figure out how to dial this in. One of the ways that I've been exceptionally good at rising from 8 levels in all the way to a VP in a Fortune 50 company is because I was dialed into my strengths, and I always learned how to tweak my role or accept the next role that always played more into my zone of excellence, creeping into zone of genius to where I can't be duplicated. Right? Hope that makes sense. This is some good stuff. I love this. This is like, I think I like doing this better on Fridays. It helps me leave on a good note. End the week, give you guys some good stuff. All right. So here's the next thing. Okay. I said we're going to have a couple things. The next thing I want you to do is it's called an alignment audit, right? How do you know that you're not in alignment? Sorry, how do you know you're not in alignment? Okay, so now that we know that there's an issue, okay, Toya, cool. Thank you for calling out. You gave me words to the thing I said. Yes, I'm experiencing a little bit of cognitive dissonance. Now that we understand the problem, right? We got to figure out where your energy is leaking. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through what I like to call like an alignment audit, right? It's a framework I've developed. Okay, part one of this, and I may have to make this like a whole course because I could talk about this for a hot minute. So pillar 1, right? So here are the four pillars of authentic alignment. Number 1 is energy versus competence. Are you optimizing for what you're good at, or what energizes you? So, high performers, people who do exceptionally well in their jobs, often mistake familiar for alignment. You're good at the work, so you assume that it's right for you. But competence is not the same thing as being in alignment with what it is that you want to do or who you're called to be, etc. Right? I hope that makes sense. So pillar 1 is energy versus competence. Am I doing something that's just familiar? And so because it's familiar, I'm going to stick with it? Or is this actually work that's energizing? And not all work is going to energize you all day. But you should be able to understand, hey, as I go throughout my day, as I go throughout my week, how much time am I spending in things that are actually I'm just good at, but actually doesn't energize me by my work? I'll tell you now, for me personally, when I am bored at work, my performance sometimes can just start to decline because I'm not challenged. And I like to be challenged in my work. I like to problem solve in my work. Okay. So those are things that I would think about. So if you think about this, here's a question. I'm going to drop a question for you into the chat. So this will kind of help you. First pillar, right? Energy versus competence. That's the first pillar. So when we think about this is the question I want you to ask. Give me a second because I've got to drop it in like 3 places because of this platform. All right. Hold on. I got one more spot to drop it in. I got to drop it in the actual app. Give me a second, y'all. There we go. Okay. So this is kind of what we're looking at. So the question is, think about your last really good day at work. When's the last time you had a really, really good day at work? What were you doing that day that you wish you could have did more of? I'm gonna give you my example for my job or where I used to work. What I really, really loved was going in and speaking with leaders and getting them to understand the importance of leadership and getting them to truly understand, like, hey, this is the importance. Your people are your assets. The powers in your people, getting leaders to really understand that, watching these aha moments go in and help people really understand how to maximize their leadership potential, not just for their teams, but also leadership potential within themselves. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Like, this one piece of white thing was killing me. I was like, I don't know what that's on my hat, but I had to get that off. Right. That was what I loved it, but I didn't do a lot of it. Most of my time was spent in meetings about meetings, and I hated it because I was always happiest with the people. If I'm in the, if I'm in the office and I run across somebody, maybe it's somebody early in career, maybe it's an intern, and we're going and we're talking and I'm developing and I'm people, giving them game. You know what I'm saying? For those of y'all who don't know what that means, like telling them how things actually work. Like I loved every single second of it. Like that's really where I was happiest. If I'm stuck and I'm in meetings about meetings, so either if I was either with the people or with my team, I was happy. If I was stuck doing like bureaucratic bull and all that, like I didn't want to do it. And so more of my job started to become about that, and I hated it. That's a great example of almost, right? Like I was a VP at a Fortune 50 company. It was all there. And I had this cognitive dissonance constantly nagging at me. My pay is great. The title is great. My team is great. My company, eh. But most of my work was not, it wasn't hidden. It was almost there. So that's example. Okay. So that's pillar number one. All right. We got to get through this because I got like one more point to make. So you said it was yesterday you were using skills that you were trained on years ago. I love that. But like the question is like why how can you create more of those moments? I think sometimes we think that we can't, but we can. Either we create it within the roles that we are or we start to find opportunities that allow us to do that. Does that make sense, Levon? Hope it does. All right. Pillar number two. Pillar number two. So we're talking about these 4 pillars of authentic alignment. How do you actually get in alignment? How do you get into where you want to go to high performance, to the highest level, higher levels of performance? This is when I talk about alignment, I'm talking about where your performance and your capabilities, all of that is in sync. Pillar number 2 is influence versus execution. Influence versus execution. Okay. Are you influencing decisions or are you just executing them? I did not say that right. Executing them. Right? See this pattern, right? Repeatedly. You have people who are brilliant, who excel and implement strategy, but you're craving to actually create strategy. Or people who are great at managing up, but want to be setting the vision. Right? This is just how you go. Like, hey, influence versus execution. Be thinking about that, right? So this is the question. So when we think about influence versus execution, this is the question I'm going to have you ask yourself. Hold on, give me a second. Here's the next question. I hope y'all write these down because I delete these lives. I'm building an online community. I told you guys I'm building an app, but I'm also building an online community. And so these trainings will actually exist in the online community. So if you're a part of the community, you'll be able to actually go back and watch these, but they actually go bye-bye from the internet, typically by the end of the day, or typically Saturday morning. That's what I'm doing with these. All right, so here you go. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much influence do you have over the strategic direction of your work? Ooh. Woo. That's a tough on a scale of 1 to 10. How much influence do you have over the strategic direction of your work? So when you think about influence versus execution, there are people who love execution, who be like, "Yo, I don't actually want to think strategically. I don't need the influence. Just tell me what I need to do, and I'm happy doing that." So you got to be thinking about that as you're thinking about how to actually move towards your role, what it is that you're doing. That's another thing you need to be thinking about. Okay. Pillar number 3. You ready? Pillar number 3 is growth versus maintenance. Growth versus maintenance. Are you growing or are you just maintaining? Are you growing or are you just maintaining? Some roles that you have are designed to just keep things running smoothly. Others are designed to build something new. Neither is wrong. But if you are a growth-oriented person in a maintenance role, you're going to feel that friction. You're going to feel the friction. It's another way to look at it. You're maintaining. That's good to know. Right? I personally, I heavily lean on growing and building versus maintenance and optimization. The only time I care about optimization is typically when I'm getting to build optimization. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Neither of these are wrong, by the way. There's not a wrong answer. But if you are a growth oriented person in a maintenance job, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle. So we have to ask ourselves this question. Ask ourselves this question right here. All right. This is the question for pillar number 3. Hold on. I've got to drop. Man, I got to drop it in all the spaces. Yo, this is killing me. Hold on. Here we go. Levon, I also saw your number. I saw that 3, by the way. Thank you for sharing. Okay. What percentage of your time is spent on growing/building versus maintenance and optimization? What percentage of your time is spent on growth/building versus maintenance and optimization? You need to know that. Are you a growth-minded individual? And it's not a bad thing. There are some people who be like, yo, I like to go in and I like to keep things running. Like, that's my thing. There is a space and place for both types of people. There's not a wrong answer in this. You can have a growth mindset. You can have a growth mindset and still love to be maintenance/optimization. Like, you love to be the person who keeps things in order. That's cool. So there's not the right. You can still have a growth mindset. Really, this is about like, hey, I like to be stretched all the time in my job. I like building brand new things. That's me. I don't like maintenance types of roles. Typically, maintenance types of roles are a little bit more predictable. Right? But you got to know. So, Levon, I see that. You said you're maintaining, but you want growth. So the question is, who do you need to talk to make that happen? What conversations do you need to have? How does that look? Because there's a way to go about doing it, and there's a way to go about getting that. Okay? All right, last pillar. Last pillar. You said growth mindset and like order. Okay. So you may be a combo of both. You could like the growth mindset, but you like to maintain things. And that's cool too. Like I said, there's no good or bad, right? Because I think growth mindset is very different than what I'm talking about around growth. 4th pillar, pillar number 4 in this audit that we're doing. Okay. 4th pillar is, are your core values being honored? Woo! Or just accommodated? So this is values versus requirements. Okay. This is subtle but crucial. Your role might not violate your values, but does it actively utilize and celebrate them? I will tell you now, pillar number 4 is what sealed the deal that I had to shoot the deuces. It sealed the deal for me. The funny thing is, my values were not being necessarily violated, but I felt like at times I was compromising them. And not even that I was being asked to do anything that was unethical, right, or illegal, but there are certain things that I value. I value authenticity. So if I'm in a position where I have to constantly spin a narrative or share a narrative that's a half truth or a partial truth, integrity is also a value. And so sometimes integrity and authenticity rub against maintaining a corporate narrative. Does that make sense? So you got to know, what are your values? I actually have a GPT that I built for my clients that helps them actually discover their values and drop them in. And here's what I say. If you actually want that GPT, that's what I want you to do. I want you to drop me a DM. So if you're on LinkedIn seeing this, if you're on Facebook, drop me a DM and say, hey, can you send me the values GPT? I'll send it to you. Okay. I'll send it to you so that you can just work through it. That's so I would love to be able to share that with you. So hop on, if you're seeing this, drop me a DM on Facebook, on LinkedIn, YouTube. I don't know what to tell y'all. Just be like, yo, me, I'll hit you up. Okay. This is what you got to know. Okay. You got to know your core values. So the reflection question we have, right? For this last pillar is, what's one core value of yours that your current role doesn't really tap into? But you got to know you got to know your values. You got to know your core values. You have to be able to define your core values. You got to know you got to know. You have to be able to give a definition to those. Okay? So, when we think about this, these are questions. These are things that you need to be thinking about. Write them down, think about them. So, when we think about an overall audit on a scale of 1 to 10, right? We have to think about, are you energized or drained with your core responsibilities at work? How much strategic influence do you have versus how much do you want? How much are you building or growing versus how much are you maintaining? How much of your daily tasks actually reflect your core values? This is important. Be thinking about this. So this is like straight up. There you go. I'm going to give that to you. It's just like live audit, real time. Okay. I'm not going to give y'all 3 minutes to do this because we got to keep rolling. But I want you to be thinking about that. This is for you. It's just to let you know where things are leaking. This is how you find the leaky bucket. Because you come on and be like, yo, I don't know why. I don't know why I'm so tired. I feel like I have a good job, but like there's some things that are off. And sometimes you may be in the right space, you may be in the right role, you just have to tweak some things. And if you position yourself where you're in a role or in a job or something like that that allows you to do that, then that works. Right? I hope this is helping. Let me know in the chat if this is helping. And I actually just unmuted myself. Hold on, give me a second. Let me know if this is helping you all. Okay. Because I think this is so important. This is key. All right. So now the question is the strategic shift. The strategic shift. What does that look like? These are 3 specific strategies. 3 shift strategies that you need to take and think about. Okay. For the solution, based on like kind of where things are, there's kind of 3 shifts that you can make. Shift number 1 is the internal shift. Changing how you show up in your current role. There's the lateral shift, right? Just moving within your actual organization. There's an external shift, and that may be a strategic role or a company change. Here's how I like to say this a lot of times to people. It's really understanding whether you need to move up, move out, or move on. Okay? Move up, move out, or move on. That's how we have to think about these things. So let me break down each one. So we talk about the internal shift. This is often the fastest and lowest risk option, right? So you stay in your current role, you stay what you're doing, but you are strategically adjusting how you operate. Okay. That's kind of what that looks like. So if your energy score was low, this is like volunteering for projects. And I did this all the time. Like, yo, this is like, I can't tell you how many times I've leveled up in my career just by volunteering for a project. Be like, all right, I'm just gonna do this on my spare time. This is stuff people don't tell you. But I have absolutely volunteered for a project, and it's leveled me up. Right? You can start another way. You can potentially, if your influence score was low, you could share more strategic ideas. If your growth score was low, you could either pilot a project or create that. A process improvement. If your value score was low, you can find ways to incorporate what matters to you. Okay. That's the way you think about this. The next one is the lateral shift. Okay. The lateral shift. Now, this happens. Sometimes the fix just requires a different role. And that's the reality. But it doesn't necessarily require a different company. So, like, remember saying moving out, moving up, moving up, moving out, or moving on, right? I think about moving up is just how you elevate your current role. And sometimes even, sometimes even like promotion within that. Moving on, it's like the lateral shift, right? This is just fixing. This requires just like fix it. You may move to a different role, but not necessarily to a different company. So this may be moving from an execution role to a strategy role, right? Okay, this could be, well, actually, this is a lateral shift, is also like individual contributor to a team lead, client facing to internal facing, changing from specialist to generalist. So you start to see where this lateral shift is, right? So it's kind of more like moving up, I would say. A little bit of move out, up, out, and on. Okay. This is the lateral shift. What we have to be thinking about when we think about this lateral shift. So you've got the first shift, the internal. Fastest, lowest risk option. Stay in your current role. Strategically, you just adjust how you operate. The other shift, when you're doing this audit, you say, okay, maybe this isn't it. Maybe I got to figure something out. The lateral shift just says, hey, sometimes the fix just requires me moving to a different role, but I'm staying at the same company. Okay, that's one. A great example of this could be like you're in an analyst role, right? You're good at your job, but you still feel stuck. Maybe your influence and your growth is low. You can have a conversation with your leader about transitioning to more like a business strategy role, right? 6 months later, you can move, and then your engagement scores went through the roof. Like, so these are ways that you can kind of go in and do that. All right. And then there's strategy number 3. And sometimes the gap is too big to close internally, but you just you realize it's time to go. But here's the key. This move should be strategic and not reactive. Strategic and not reactive. Okay? The strategic, you have to be strategic in how you choose to exit if you want to exit. So you need to clarify what your criteria is. What are you actually looking for? Goes back to, do you know your values? Do you know your skill sets? Do you know where your zone of excellence is, competence, zone of genius? You got to actually know. And then you got to identify companies or roles that score higher, right? So even as you're looking for roles, where do you think those roles are sitting with those things that we talked about, right? Where are they sitting within those pillars that we talked about? Where do they sit with energy, influence, growth, and values? Where are these organizations or roles that sit within that? Okay. Number 3, you got to position yourself. So if we're talking about this external shift, you have to position yourself for those opportunities while you're still employed. Okay. Position yourself for these opportunities while you're still employed. All right. And number 4 is you make the move when you have a clear upgrade, not just a change. And so sometimes for certain people, sometimes like, yo, I just need to get out so I can get my head above water. That happens. And then you upgrade as you go. I make it very transparent. I tell people all the time, when I chose to move out, when I chose the external shift, I was an executive in a company, which means I didn't leave empty-handed. Executive in a large company. So I was able to make that decision when I felt like the gap was too far to close and I wanted to shift. It wasn't there. Like, there were a couple of opportunities, but just how everything landed, it was what it was. Okay. So I'll give you a great example. Let's do another example. I like to use examples. We're going to say this is Lisa, marketing director, great company, but her role was 80% maintenance and 20% growth. She realized that she needed a role that was more 70% growth and 30% maintenance. Right. So she flipped it. She wanted to be in a higher growing 30% maintenance. So she strategically networked and found a business development role at a startup. 2 years later, and that's how you move up. Right. Even the things that I do now, the projects that I take on, the organizations I choose to partner with, it is all strategic and all by design. Hear me out. Okay. And so there's some ways you can go about it. But the goal is, there's some verbiage and different things and different scripts that I share with my clients that I think would be really good to help. And so this is just an example of what I do, what I love to do. I know we're getting close to time, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop this in here again. Once again, one of my favorite things to do is to be able to coach people. And this is one of the reasons why I did this, because I want to be able to coach people real time. This opportunity for you to be coached in actual IRL. And then other people are able to learn just from you sharing your experience. I'll ask you questions. We'll talk through it. But here's what I say. I just dropped this link in the chat. This particular link will take you to my back door. And in my back door, it basically takes you into a waiting area for me. And then I will bring you on stage and you and I will actually have a conversation. I'll coach you real time. I'm putting that out there. I always want to make sure. So we're getting close to time wrapping up. So I just want to make sure I extend the opportunity. If you want to be coached by me for free, real time right now. So a lot of times I feel like people learn more when they kind of get to hear people getting walked through or talk through certain things. It's up to you. And the great thing about it is this doesn't live past 24 hours anyways, except on the back door. Once you join my community, which I'm hopefully going to be launching here shortly, you'll be able to see this. But aside from that, let me know. So click the link. It'll take you to my back door and then you can be coached real time. And so I'm going to give this last little bit of tidbit of information, give people time to decide if they want to get coached real time, and click the link. I'll see you in the back door and then we'll hop in live. Don't be scared. You don't have to air your business. We just have conversation. So what can you do? What can you do over the next month to really kind of figure things out? Okay. Number one, audit. Awareness is the key, right? You got to do an audit. You got to understand what's going on. You got to figure these things out, right? Understand where your energy levels are. One of my favorite things to do with clients is I'll say, hey, audit your work for a week. What are you doing? And is this energy giving or energy draining? It's a very simple energy audit. But what this allows you to do is really kind of start to understand what that looks like. Okay. The next thing you do is make adjustments, right? Choose a spot or something that you're doing. Volunteer for a project. Just start small. Don't just become aware and then just be like, oh, it's too much. You don't have to fix it all today. Just make micro adjustments, small moves, baby steps. The next thing that you can do is have conversations, whether that's conversations with your significant other, conversations with your leaders, conversation with your skip level. Have the conversations. Another thing that you can do, commit and plan. Commit and plan. Commit and plan. Make a decision. Are you going to make an internal, a lateral, or an external shift? And then create a 90-day plan, right? You can set up the systems and everything else that you need so that you can maintain in alignment, right? That's what you can do. So those are things. Start small, track your progress, stay strategic, if you will. I'll add, that's what a coach is for. That's a lot of what I do, is really helping people get these things figured out, right? When I think about Catalyst Life Coaching, it is a lot about helping people figure out how to get out of their own way, reach these next levels of performance and moving forward. So start small. I'm going to put this out here one more time. The link is in the chat. If you want to hop on and be coached real time, all you do is click the link. Once you click the link, it's going to take you somewhere. It's going to take you on a screen. And then that screen is going to say, hey, do you want to do this? And I'll be like, yes. You put your name in, and then I'll see your name on the backside. Okay. So if nobody else is hopping on, I'm going to just kind of recap, and then we'll go from there. Okay. And we're going to wrap this in a nice, neat little bow. If, like I said, I'll give people a couple minutes. We had somebody join last week. It was super dope. So 3 most important things from today. 3 most important things from today. Number 1, almost aligned work is more dangerous than completely misaligned work because it tricks you into thinking the problem is you and not the situation. That's number 1. That's takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2, small strategic adjustments can often close the gap, can close the alignment gap without necessarily having to do major life overhauls. You don't always have to quit your job. Sometimes it's just making those small adjustments. Oftentimes I would make adjustments into the work that I was doing. I would create projects, or I would figure things out, or I help people optimize. That's a lot of how I got growth into a role that sometimes was more maintenance. Is I would just find things that needed to be fixed and I would fix them, or I would make suggestions about how to fix them. And I was able to feed that growth side of me. And those are things that actually paid dividends in my career. It's not just always about being at the right place in the right time. Sometimes it's about understanding what strategic adjustments you need to make and how they position you for the future too. Okay. Next thing, the goal. Third takeaway, the goal isn't perfect. The goal isn't perfection, right? It's about finding like a way, like a authentic alignment, right? With where you want to go, how you want to perform. And that allows you to bring your best self to the work that you do and to your performance. This is just high performer stuff, right? So here's my challenge to you. Within the next 48 hours, I want you to complete this sentence and write it down. To feel more aligned in my work, I would say to feel more aligned in my life. I'll give you both because I think this is just as important. The one thing I most need is blah, blah, blah. Fill in the blank. And then I need you to take one small action toward that thing. All right. So I don't see anybody in the backside. So we're getting ready to close this out. But here's why I want to leave you with this. Good enough work or a good enough life isn't good enough work. It's not good enough for the career and the life that you actually want. So good enough work and life isn't good enough for the career and the life that you want. So I say almost doesn't count. You know, every time I say almost doesn't count, I think about Brandy, right? But everybody knows almost doesn't count. That's my jam. If you know, I ain't no singer, but if you don't know that song, that's a jam from Brandy. But I just want to encourage you guys, like I said, send me a DM if you want that values GPT. I'd be more than happy to share it with you. And then also, if you want to work with me, we can have a conversation about what that looks like, because I'm really passionate about helping people get to the next level in life. All right. So with that being said, I hope you all have an amazing week. I hope this was helpful. Hope this was fruitful. And let me know if there's anything else. Like I said, send me a DM, and I look forward to connecting with y'all. I'm going to work on this app and this community. I cannot wait to share this with y'all. All right. Peace. Have a great weekend.